Good morning, everybody. My name is Osagi Alonge. I am the director for ORIDE at OPay. And I'm here with Babs Ogunde from Kuda Bank and Mr. Wilfred Bama from Stanbic IBC. So we're here to talk about financial inclusion. I think it's a very interesting topic now, and I have a few questions to ask our gentlemen here. So please, first of all, I want you guys to be as honest as possible and be as explicit as possible in terms of delivering your answers as well. The first question is, compared to other industries in Nigeria, the FinTech, the financial services industry seems to be ahead of the pack in terms of innovation and investment. Some statistics already show that investment since 2014 has surpassed $250 million. Why do you think, the financial industry, services industry is way ahead of the other industries? Babs.
Okay. When it comes to investments, most people, they want to make money. And, FinTech and financial services seems to be the industry that can easily monetize for investors. Also in terms of, numbers, everybody, absolutely everybody, whatever it is that you're doing, it's going to involve money. And, essentially that is what FinTech is really all about. It's the movement and the flow of money, either through payments, savings, credit, whatever it is. So, as far as investments goes, it's a natural thing to happen. And as we also look at what people are doing, in terms of what entrepreneurs are doing, most people today are looking for solutions in financial services. So if you have 100 entrepreneurs and 80 of them are looking for ways to solve, financial service issues, it's natural that most of the investment is going to go to 80 people out of 100. So, it's just the way the situation is currently.
Thank you. Wilfred, do you also think that because every other service relies, the backbone of every service, if we're buying or selling, has to result to payment, has to result to buying or selling, and that then means that you have to involve money in it. Do you think that's one of the major factors why everybody is then focused on, payments?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I think you're right. The growth of the FinTech industry in Nigeria has been quite remarkable. And investment in that space has also been very, very remarkable in the last few years. What is responsible, to be honest, is opportunity. It's about the opportunity, right? I tell people that 9 years ago, when I was running a project for the Central Bank of Nigeria to just find a way of transforming retail payments, there were about 5,000 active point-of-sale terminals in Nigeria. 5,000. Okay. Compare that to where we are today, you'll see how the transformation has happened. Again, because the opportunity is massive. Okay. People who want to make investments are looking for where they'll get returns, really. And if the opportunity in the FinTech space, in the payment space is huge, they will go there. And like you said, traditionally, from the days of the barter and all of that to today, essentially every transaction will have to do with some form of exchange, right? And that payment will then be enabled by either a bank or by other providers. And what is happening is that a lot of fintechs have paid attention to that payment space, okay? If you look at the country today, you could argue that about 30% of the players are focused on payments, right? Another 20-something% focused on lending. Again, it's just providing that capability around payments because that's where they see massive opportunities. But I believe we'll get into the other areas as well. Yeah, thanks.
I hope so, and I hope so real fast. All right, talking about financial inclusion, there are about 35 million, only 35 million Nigerians who have BVNs. That's less than half. So talking about financial inclusion, how do we start to solve this problem? How do you suggest to bring financial inclusion to those the unbanked, so to say?
Okay. So, if we look at what has happened sort of in the last 20 years, 20, 30 years in Nigeria, I think Nigeria has actually done really, really well in terms of solving financial inclusion. So financial inclusion is not just about people that are unbanked. It's also about people that are, underbanked. I remember times, back in the day when, there were certain banks, certain old generation banks that it felt like a prison cell. Like literally you want to go and get money and you would have to sit down in like a really hot banking hall. There's a lady at the other end, with bars, so, that
we have a very young audience here. I don't think they can remember.
That's why I said like 30 years ago, but then there were some new banks that came and just like simple things, putting like ACs in the banking halls, which is like normal now, and it's making banking, kind of interesting for people and sort of more friendly. And we've seen a progression of that sort of from those days now that, technology is more prevalent and just getting access and making it attractive for pretty much everybody to use. So when you now look at sort of all the different aspects of financial services, so you have, people looking after your money, you have the ability to kind of send money to absolutely everybody, and also the ability to get access to credit. So these are like the fundamentals of financial services. So I think Nigeria has actually done very well to have 35 million people out of, when we say, 200 million is debatable, but also actually out of that 200 million, how many of them are currently bankable? We have a lot of them that are children, we have a lot of them that are like really old people, but, there's still a lot more to do. And I think the next step of getting people financially included is now to bring down the cost of financial services. Now, a lot of people, even the people that are banked today, sort of financial services is kind of prohibitive for a lot of people. So we cannot expect people to sort of digitize their cash when, your 2,000 naira, when you digitize it, it's no longer going to be 2,000 naira. It's going to be, 2,000 naira less whatever it is when you digitize it. To get access to it, something's going to come out of it. So, there are all these, charges, and then we expect these guys to be excited about being financially included. The question we should ask is, who does financial inclusion, who does it really benefit? Is it all of these guys? They know about financial services. I think it's a choice. They choose not to be financially included because it's not attractive to them. So if a lot of people are using WhatsApp, it's free, it's easy, it's making life easier. When telcos came, MTN and Co and Glo, people used it. So it's not necessarily like an education or technology or whatever. It's a price point. We're a price-sensitive continent. So the moment we can figure out a way to provide financial services literally at no cost, then we can begin to seriously think about really solving the financial or the lack of inclusion in financial services.
Thank you, Babs. Just to piggyback off his journey from the banks from 30 years ago to 20 years ago, I remember I was schooling outside Lagos, and I had no idea, so I saved my money in a bank in Lagos, and I traveled to the States, and I couldn't withdraw my money. Who remembers? a long time ago, but it was a big problem. I had to use another bank called Trade Bank. Who remembers Trade Bank? Okay, that lady in the front remembers Trade Bank, and that's how I was able to get my money. Anyways, Mr. Wilfred, about 10 million people have cards, ATM cards, right? We say 35 million people have registered BVNs. Are banks a premium service?
Okay, I'll come to that, but I would like to add a couple of points on the earlier question around financial inclusion. If we go by FINA studies, and again, that's about the most reliable data we have today around financial inclusion, you have, like you rightly said, just over there is 5.6% people really included. The other one, you've got about 36% of the 100 million adults by their estimates that are fully financially excluded, meaning they don't have access to banks, they don't have access to even non-formal banking institutions or even other unlicensed informal institutions. So overall, you've got about 60.1 million unbanked people. Now, the thing to note is that out of these 60.1 million people, about 63% of them live in the rural areas, okay? Over 20% of them have no form of formal education, okay? When, by FINA studies again, and I'm responding partly to his points, 12% of them are the ones who said they have challenges with the cost of financial services, right? Cost is very critical. I agree fully that we need to address costs. But if you look at that analysis, 35% of them have irregular income, which is really the challenge. So people are financially excluded because probably they don't have money to be included in the first place, all right? So the question is, how do we empower the people, okay? So they have things to do, okay? And then they will have reasons to be included in the financial system. If you look at the FinTech players today, with due respect, okay, we offer, because we've got a good, we have wonderful capabilities. The FinTechs have wonderful capabilities in lending. But the rates at which those loans are given to this same group of people we are talking about is almost prohibitive, right? So I know that at some point, because you don't have a lot of data to do your analysis, you have to cover the risk of the people you're lending to. But as you perfect that model, you then need to try and reduce the rate so that the funds can get to the people who need it more. Because then these people will be economically empowered. They will be able to then have funds to transact, and then they will be in the financial system. Okay? So I believe that is one area that we must look at. And one thing I also say is that when you see the model of the telecoms when they came into the country, they didn't focus in the cities. If I take a poll here, I'm not sure there's anybody here who doesn't have a bank account, okay? So they went to the rural areas. They established base stations in locations where you had no electricity. They were powering those things with generator, okay? But what did that do? It had a network effect. People in the cities now started, buying phones for their loved ones in the rural areas, making calls to them, and all of that. So long as the fintechs continue to drive solutions or innovations at solving problems for those who live in the urban areas.
Infrastructure-based solutions.
Yes, we will have a challenge with getting the level of financial inclusion that we desire. And like you said, are banks in the premium service? I don't think so. To be honest, I don't think so. You see what I'm wearing, this 909. If you dial it, you can open an account in seconds. In seconds. And it's not an advert. If you see what the industry is doing with the shared network expansion, SANEF, is about reaching every part of Nigeria. The banking industry as a whole came together and formed that association, the body of SANEF, to put together agents that can be spread across the entire country to make sure that we provide that access, because access is the real challenge where this broken bank. So for me, to answer your question directly, the answer is we don't measure the kind of service by plastics, to be honest. There are several other ways you can access your money, not necessarily by number of people who have cards. So banks are indeed reaching out to those lower level segments to provide services. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wilfred. Still on financial inclusion and looking at the, if we then simplify it into genders, we find out that women are at the bottom half, about 51.5% of them, right? Of women that share out of this whole stats, 55.1% are women. There has to be a different approach, right, to include these women. There are a lot of cultural factors, societal factors, has to do with education as well. What is the strategy? What do you think should be the strategy to including, to including women financially, or onboarding women, financially? Yeah, let's start with Wilfred.
All right, thanks. Now, again, my approach to, and that's what I think the fintechs do really, is to identify the need, okay? Identify the need and then build solutions to address those specific needs. So if we are building solutions that speak to the unique needs of the women, we will get them included. If I look at the financially excluded, and I look at those in the rural areas, if you talk farming, you probably get more of male population in the farming segment. If you then talk trading, you probably get a lot more of women in that sector, okay? So if we then build solutions that speak to the unique needs of people in that area, we could get a lot more of them included. As for instance, if a shopping complex gets burnt, people become poor overnight, right? Why are we not building insurance solutions for those small traders that even if their share goes burnt, they can pick up the next day and continue from where they stopped, right? If we want the big insurance companies to sell insurance, of course they can pay the premium. But if we devise solutions that can then take little premiums over time, and then we aggregate it because it's a game of numbers, and we're able to then solve that kind of challenge for the women, for instance, we'll get them included. So for me, it's about what are the unique challenges of the women in the area we're looking at, and what solutions can we use to target those areas?
Thank you very much, Wilfred. Babs?
So I'm going to have to agree with Wilfred, even though I don't really agree completely with him from his last, the last comments. So when you have an environment where the people designing products and, basically telling us, what we need, when most of those people are male, it's only natural that the product that's designed is going to be more geared towards a male audience. So to really tackle the problems, I believe there needs to be, a balance in the workforce. More women need to be sort of included sort of right at the beginning of sort of the design process. And that way, we'll get input from the people that actually know what the root, the pain points of the female is. So I think that's like the starting point. And then just generally in our society, we kind of need to see, both genders on a more equal footing. I think it's just, it's an African thing, when we talk about services, when we talk about anything, it's usually, we're talking about the male gender. I don't necessarily believe that we should have sort of, oh, this is female only, because already when you do that, you're already kind of segregating. So, it's going to impact, quality. It's almost like, oh, it's a favor, or when you hear, maybe, and I'll give an example. You hear this, and this is not an African example. It's global. So I'm a big tennis fan, and Serena Williams is like probably, I would say, the greatest tennis player like on the planet ever. But there's always like a qualification of it. Oh, it's like, oh, a female greatest tennis, but like, why can't it be like the greatest, period? So when we change that mindset, we can start actually looking at things more objectively and less in a male sort of orientated mindset. And that way we'll be able to, I believe, come up with much better solutions for everybody, not just for men.
Thank you very much. Charity begins at home. If we really want to push for financial inclusion as regards women, it means we need to start from our companies. We need to start with ourselves. So whether we're hiring product designers who are women, people in, and not just hiring women as interns or, first level, women who are in places of power who can make those critical decisions as well. Let's move on. The CBN governor has indicated that Nigeria will attain 95% financial inclusion by 2024. First of all, do you guys think that is possible? And the second question is, what do you think has made him give that prediction? First question.
Yeah, my company is regulated by CBN. So whatever CBN governor says, I kind of have to agree. But to be honest, the short answer is, it is possible. Lots of things are possible, but to really get things done, I think it takes a collective effort. It takes effort from those people building solutions, so like ourselves on stage. It takes effort from government, and it takes effort from the consumers as well, from customers, because every single person has a role to play. One of the things that we try to do at Kuda is to actually educate our customers on why we're doing certain things, so that they can go out there and preach, to everybody. Because ultimately, if everybody understands the benefits of what we're doing and the benefits of sort of, certain types of financial services, it's a lot easier to convince your friend, rather than, either government or private sector always preaching, because there's always an ulterior motive from, there's a lack of, trust, I would say, from consumers to organizations. So I think if we all hold hands together and just, it's kind of like all hands on deck. And, one thing I would say about government and CBN is, we kind of need to take it a little bit easy on some of these new taxes that come up, if we're serious about achieving certain goals. There's a new one, I think, it's a POS tax or something. I don't, and the POS is supposed to be something that has really contributed, significantly to helping, ease or to ease payments for everybody. If we now start making that more expensive, it's kind of like counterintuitive, and it makes that 2024 goal, slightly further away. So, I think all these little things and us coming together and dialoguing and bringing sort of smaller companies and FinTech organizations to the table to help, provide these kind of solutions, or making licensing, slightly easier to get for the innovators, and for the banks, the big banks, not necessarily being not being sort of defensive and protectionist. I think, it can, we should see each other more as a team rather than as, competition. I mean, there's always going to be competition, but if collectively we increase the market share and, we only have, 5% of, I don't know, 100 trillion, it's much better than having 50% of 1 billion, So it needs to be a collective effort. And that way, I think, generally as a nation, we will achieve anything. The question is, can we work together?
Thank you. Wilfred, Babs is saying you should be easy on the new guys.
I will speak for my organization, and I know it's the same thing for most banks, really. We see fintechs as partners, really. Odoya wasn't here from Piggyverse. She's come to present our digital breakfast session. Okay. She's come to present at our digital breakfast session. I have monthly digital breakfast sessions with executives from not just our country, but Standard Bank Group across the continent. And I invite Nigerian fintechs to come and speak to them. Standard Bank has also invested in a company known as Founders Factory Africa. You probably know them, who are scaling fintechs. 3 of the first 5 fintechs they are scaling are present in Nigeria, and we are working closely to help scale those fintechs. They are bringing another 3 fintechs on board. I'll be in South Africa next week to help evaluate those companies. And again, it's supporting the fintechs. So we are indeed working together with the fintechs. Now to the question.
I want to even go further with the questions. You have access to the stats. The CBN governor has said 2024. How fast are we growing?
We're not growing as fast as we should if we're going to make targets. But what I can add to that is that there is now a very deliberate effort by the regulator and the players to work towards this objective of financial inclusion. The target before now was 80% by 2020, which we have not achieved. And then the CBN rebaseline to say by 2024 we're going to go 95.5%. But if you look at what has happened over the last couple of months, you see that the CBN is taking very deliberate effort, licensing of a number of payment service banks, for instance, bringing out some policies, and I mean, there are a couple of policies that I know they may have to revisit given the discussions that are happening. But what I know and can say for sure is that there's a renewed focus. I've talked about the SANEF from the banking industry, which aims to grow agency by 500,000 next year. We know the number of super agents that are licensed to provide financial services across the country. We know so many banks today that used to be corporate banks, now they're going into retail, not just regular retail banks, but going into the grassroots to provide financial services. So I think it's doable, but like you said, we need to work together. We're all parties.
All right, thank you. And my last question would be about cybersecurity. So you're convincing a lot of people to go digital. You're convincing a lot of people to, put their money where they physically can touch it. I'm talking about the unbanked now. But there's been a lot of conversation about cybersecurity, email phishing. I just learned of something called packet sniffers, devices that they can throw around your house, and it can, get access to your Wi-Fi, take all your data, have access to your cards, all your information and data. How are you solving this problem? Because I'm sure you've gotten attacks, and I'm not talking DDoS attacks. I'm saying real attacks, right? Because people there are trying to get access to your system. You have billions of naira that you have to protect. What is the solution?
Okay, so cybersecurity is not something you say I've solved, right? Because it's continuously evolving. So what it means is that you have to also continuously respond or be very proactive in knowing what is happening and defending your systems and your institution. Now, what you see is that most organizations, especially the banks, have very, very solid cybersecurity capability, very sound with people. They invest significantly, I can talk about that, significantly in the training and skilling of cybersecurity experts, and then investing on cutting-edge technologies, because you can't come and tell somebody that the money you gave me is I can't find it. You really can't say that. You have to find a way to pay back, right? So you must, as you look at making money, you must find a reliable way of securing people's funds. And again, I know that fintechs a lot play with, they do a lot of cloud-based solutions. So that provides some security to an extent before you begin to talk about other areas. So, like I said, it is an evolving area, but what players must do is to continue to build and enhance their capability in that sector.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one other really important thing, again, it is about collaboration, it's about education, you know. So those of us on the inside, you know, we have more insight into how these attacks, you know, can sort of be successful. I think, you know, we have an obligation to do as much as we can to sort of educate customers. At the end of the day, it's the customer's money. So we have an obligation to let them know, you know, simple things that they can do to kind of minimize the opportunity for these kind of attacks. So I believe, you know, again, with everything, it's more about fighting together, running together. So with cybersecurity as well, you know, it's continuously evolving. But I think, you know, the industry needs to do more in education so that, you know, customers can also protect themselves.
Thank you very much, Babs. You've heard it from the experts. You've heard it from us. Financial inclusion is very much on track. And as Babs Ogundeye and William Bama have promised us, just like the CBN governor has, in 2024, we will be 95% included. Thank you very much.